I loved my wife, until I found out the baby wasn't mine. She took everything, and I disappeared. It's under 20 words, emotionally gripping, and instantly makes viewers curious about betrayal, loss, and the fallout. The story opens in the quiet comfort of a home that, on the surface, feels perfect. Our narrator, a 25-year-old man, emotionally observant and introspective, starts his day like any other. He wakes to sunlight filtering through sheer curtains, dust motes dancing in the soft morning glow. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifts from the kitchen, mingling with the faint scent of his wife's perfume lingering on the pillow. Everything feels ordinary, calm, almost idyllic. He watches his wife, a graceful woman in her early 40s, as she moves through the morning routine. There's a quiet elegance in her gestures, the way she brushes her hair, folds the baby's blanket, hums softly while making breakfast. She seems confident, poised, yet there's a vulnerability beneath the surface that only he notices, a flicker in her eyes when she laughs too quickly, a small hesitation when she reaches for the baby's bottle. The narrator observes these subtle cues, feeling both admiration and an unspoken closeness. He gently brushes her shoulder as she leans over to adjust the baby's blanket, an affectionate gesture meant to reassure her, and she doesn't pull away. He catches himself smiling at the small intimacy of the moment, the warmth of her skin under his fingers, the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air. Even the baby's soft coos feel like part of this quiet harmony. Yet beneath the surface, small tensions ripple. There's a brief flicker of coldness in her glance when he makes a casual joke, a word left unsaid that hangs in the air. He notices, but he brushes it off, attributing it to fatigue or stress. Still, the audience senses, and so does he, even subconsciously, that something is not quite right. These tiny cracks are foreshadowing, subtle but powerful, hinting at the emotional storm to come. The narrator reflects inwardly, appreciating the ordinary moments, the way sunlight catches the baby's fine hair, the warmth of a shared cup of coffee, the sound of their laughter mingling in the quiet house. His inner monologue is filled with love and contentment, yet tinged with an unspoken awareness that happiness can be fragile. As he sits on the edge of the couch, the baby in his lap, he brushes a tiny hand against his cheek, feeling the softness and warmth. The small, tactile details, the weight of the baby against him, the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she sleeps, the lingering fragrance of home, all create a sensory-rich portrait of domestic life. These moments are simple, human, and deeply relatable, drawing the audience into his world. This part is designed to make the viewers emotionally invested. They see the narrator's life, understand his love for his family, and feel the underlying tension before the storm hits. Every glance, every touch, every breath is loaded with subtle emotional cues that hint at the heartbreak to come. By establishing this calm and intimacy, the later betrayal will land with maximum emotional impact, making the audience ache with anticipation. The morning starts like any other, but the world the narrator inhabits suddenly shifts, like the floor beneath him giving way. He's gone to check some papers, a routine task, innocuous, harmless, when he comes across something that freezes him mid-breath. A medical report, a DNA test result, or an offhand remark slips into his hands, and the words hit him like a physical blow. The baby he has cherished, loved, and protected is not his. Time seems to stretch. The paper trembles in his hands, the ink blurring as his vision narrows. He feels his chest tighten, each heartbeat thundering painfully against his ribs. His stomach knots in confusion and betrayal, a hollow ache that spreads like ice. It's not just disbelief, it's heartbreak layered over humiliation, a deep sense of disorientation. His mind races, trying to reconcile the life he thought he knew with the shattering truth before him. He looks at his wife, sitting across the room, her expression neutral, almost unreadable, and for a moment, he wonders if she even notices the earthquake she has caused. He reaches for her hand instinctively, a silent plea for reassurance, for explanation, for the familiar warmth he used to find there. But his fingers falter in midair, hovering just inches from hers, and he pulls back. There's a frozen tension in the room, heavy and suffocating. The narrator's internal conflict rages silently. Anger fights against love, disbelief wrestles with the tenderness he still feels for her. He recalls every smile, every morning, every whispered "I love you," and realizes that each memory now carries a sting of betrayal. Even the baby, innocent and unaware, becomes a symbol of the fracture in his life. Sensory details amplify his emotional turmoil. The air feels thick, stifling, almost suffocating. The sunlight filtering through the curtains seems too bright, too harsh, spotlighting the betrayal in the quiet living room. His hands shake, fingertips tracing the edge of the paper as if trying to make sense of it through touch. The faint aroma of his wife's perfume now feels like a reminder of the deceit, mingling with the scent of baby powder and warm milk, a cruel contrast of innocence and heartbreak. He sits down, head in his hands, letting the weight of reality press down. The soft coos of the baby, once a source of warmth, now echo strangely, like a sound from another life. Every instinct to protect, nurture, and love feels undermined by a truth he cannot deny. He experiences a paradoxical urge, to scream, to run, to demand answers, yet also to retreat, to disappear from a life that has suddenly become unrecognizable. This moment is designed to immerse the audience in his emotional reality, the shock, the confusion, the physical sensation of betrayal. By slowing down the narration and lingering on his sensory experience, the trembling hands, the tight chest, the almost unbearable heaviness of the room, the audience feels the rupture as if it were happening to them. It is a pivotal turning point, the emotional earthquake that propels the story into the next phase, confrontation, flight, and the unraveling of a life once thought secure. The stage is now set. The calm life has been shattered, the betrayal revealed, and the narrator is left grappling with a storm of emotions that will define the journey ahead. The initial shock of betrayal still clings to him like a weight around his shoulders, but the storm is far from over. In the days following the revelation, the narrator begins to notice the full scope of what his wife has done. She has filed fraud papers, frozen bank accounts, and begun taking control of assets they once shared. The betrayal is no longer abstract or emotional alone, it is tangible, biting, and devastating. The first time he steps into the lawyer's office, he feels like a ghost in his own life. The room is cold, sterile, every sound amplified in the silence, the soft scrape of a chair, the faint hum of a fluorescent light, the shuffle of papers. The leather chair he sits in is stiff, unyielding, and somehow mirrors the hardness he now feels inside. He watches as documents are slid across the polished table toward him, the inked lines spelling out losses, accusations, and legal maneuverings that strip him of his former security. He clenches his hands in his lap, knuckles whitening, a subtle tremor betraying the calm he tries to maintain. The audience feels this tension, every small gesture, the tightening of fingers, the small shifts in posture, the way his chest rises and falls in shallow, controlled breaths, communicates the helplessness he experiences. It is a betrayal that pierces both the heart and the everyday life he once took for granted. The narrator's wife moves through this process with a calm detachment that is almost surreal. She files papers, signs documents, and speaks in measured tones, her confidence accentuating the narrator's disorientation. Every glance she casts toward him is measured, neutral, yet heavy with the unspoken weight of their fractured relationship. Her poise only magnifies his vulnerability, highlighting the disparity between her control and his helplessness. Even the small sensory details become poignant markers of his loss. The sterile smell of paper and ink in the office contrasts sharply with the familiar aromas of home. The scratch of a pen against paper feels like a countdown marking the erosion of his stability. The faint sound of city life outside, traffic, distant voices, the rustle of leaves, continues oblivious to the turmoil inside. And yet, inside him, time seems to stretch unnaturally, each second a slow pulse of anxiety and grief. He feels the physical manifestation of betrayal in every nerve, a hollow ache in his chest, a clenching in his stomach, a tension that travels from his jaw to his shoulders. He longs to reach out, to plead, to demand some explanation, but the legal machinery, the cold formality, and the certainty of her actions create a chasm too wide to bridge. Every instinct for connection, for touch, for dialogue, for understanding, is stifled by the weight of what has been done. This part of the story is crucial for the audience. It transforms betrayal from a personal heartbreak into a tangible, life-altering event. The emotional resonance comes not from melodrama but from the very real, human experience of losing control, of having one's life turned upside down, and of witnessing someone you loved wield power in ways that hurt you. It is slow, deliberate, and immersive, designed to make viewers feel the suffocating grip of loss, while deepening empathy for the narrator. By the end of this keynote, the audience should understand the stakes. His home, his security, and his sense of trust are all in jeopardy. The world he once knew is unraveling, leaving him vulnerable, isolated, and uncertain, setting the stage for the next phase of the story: flight, reflection, and the slow rebuilding of self. After the storm of betrayal and legal battles, the narrator realizes he can no longer stay in the life he once knew. The house that once smelled of warmth and family now feels like a cage, every corner a reminder of deceit and loss. He packs a small bag, just the essentials, some clothes, his favorite journal, and a few photos he can't bear to part with, and steps out quietly, leaving behind the life that has been torn from him. The city outside feels both familiar and alien. The hum of traffic, the distant chatter of passers-by, the occasional bark of a dog, all these ordinary sounds hit him with a strange combination of comfort and melancholy. He moves through the streets with a strange disconnection, watching life continue around him while his own has been paused, fractured, and rewritten. Every step he takes is heavy with thought. He remembers the small touches he once took for granted, the warmth of his wife's hand, the weight of the baby in his arms, the laughter that once filled the house. Now, those memories are bittersweet, haunting, and almost physical in their presence. He traces the edges of the photos in his bag with his fingers, feeling the texture of paper as a connection to a life that seems both distant and immediate. In solitude, he begins to reflect. Sitting in a small, quiet cafe, he stirs his coffee absent-mindedly, the bitter aroma grounding him in the present. The sound of rain tapping against the window, soft and rhythmic, mirrors his thoughts, steady, introspective, cleansing. He writes in his journal, letting words flow freely: anger, heartbreak, confusion, and fleeting glimpses of hope. Writing becomes a lifeline, a way to untangle the knot of emotions that threaten to overwhelm him. Physical sensations anchor his introspection. The warmth of a wool scarf around his neck, the rough texture of his worn backpack strap under his fingers, the distant warmth of sunlight through the cafe window, each small sensory detail reminds him that he is alive, that the world continues beyond the betrayal, and that he can still navigate it. He closes his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of his own heartbeat, steady and insistent, a reminder that he can endure, that he can heal. In this period of exile, he begins to notice the subtle beauty of life he had overlooked before: the gentle sway of trees in the breeze, the laughter of children playing in a park, the quiet kindness of strangers who offer a smile or a nod. These moments are small, but they are restorative. They remind him that while one chapter has ended in heartbreak, the world is still full of possibility. Emotionally, this phase is crucial. He confronts his vulnerability without shame, allowing himself to grieve, to be angry, and to slowly reclaim his sense of self. The audience feels the catharsis, the tension of betrayal begins to soften, replaced by a tentative hope, a longing to rebuild and reconnect, but on his own terms. By the end of this keynote, the narrator is no longer merely a victim of circumstance. He is a man in transition, wounded, reflective, and quietly gathering the strength to face the next chapter of life. The stage is set for subtle new connections and emotional healing, as he prepares to open his heart to trust again, even after the deepest of betrayals. After weeks of solitude and reflection, the narrator begins to feel the first flickers of something he thought impossible after betrayal: a cautious sense of connection. He has moved to a quieter part of the city, a neighborhood that hums with life but doesn't intrude. It's here, in this space between old grief and the slow rebuilding of himself, that he meets her, a woman in her early 40s, confident yet quietly vulnerable, whose presence seems to shift the air around him. Their first meeting is accidental, almost cinematic in its subtlety. Perhaps he bumps into her at a bookstore, their hands brushing over the same novel, or she offers him a warm smile at a local cafe when he struggles to reach the top shelf. The moment is small, ordinary, yet it resonates deeply. The narrator notices the graceful way she moves, the soft warmth in her gaze, and the natural confidence in her posture. He senses a depth beneath the surface, a life lived with both triumphs and quiet struggles, that mirrors his own emotional complexity. The interactions that follow are deliberately understated, rich in sensory and emotional detail. A coffee cup shared across a small table, the warmth of her hand briefly touching his as they reach for the same pen, the subtle brush of her hair as she leans over to read a note he has written. Each small gesture builds tension and intimacy without a word of overt romance. The audience can feel the unspoken chemistry, the lingering glances, the brief pauses in conversation, the smiles that speak volumes. Emotionally, these encounters are transformative for the narrator. He begins to trust again, cautiously, allowing himself to feel warmth without fear. Sitting on a park bench beside her, he notices the sound of leaves rustling above them, the distant laughter of children, and the comforting aroma of fresh-baked bread from a nearby cafe. These small details ground him, reminding him that life holds beauty even after loss. Physicality is understated but meaningful. A gentle touch on the shoulder when words fail, a shared leaning into the sunlight, fingers brushing as they reach for the same book. These moments are layered with subtle tension and unspoken desire. They communicate what words cannot: comfort, curiosity, and a tentative invitation to explore emotional closeness. The narrative also explores the narrator's internal hesitations. He is aware of the age difference and the ghosts of past betrayal that still linger. His heart races when she laughs at something he says, his pulse quickens when their hands meet, and yet he hesitates to let himself fully embrace the possibility of connection. The audience experiences his inner conflict in real time, feeling both his longing and his fear. By the end of this keynote, the stage is set for deeper emotional stakes. The narrator has begun to open his heart again, discovering that connection and affection can exist even after profound loss. The slow burn tension is now palpable, not a rush of romance, but a measured, deliberate unfolding of intimacy and trust. The audience is drawn in, invested in their subtle dance of closeness, curiosity, and cautious emotional awakening, a tender and YouTube-friendly exploration of love's resilience. After weeks of self-reflection and tentative new connections, the narrator is pulled back into the past, not by choice, but by necessity. His wife has summoned him, or circumstances force him to face the woman who upended his life. The air is thick with tension even before he crosses the threshold. Every step toward her, every turn of a familiar hallway, carries the weight of memory, the laughter they once shared, the subtle warmth of hand-holding, and the home that once felt like a sanctuary but now feels like a courtroom of emotions. The confrontation is both physical and emotional. They meet in a neutral place, perhaps a lawyer's office, a quiet living room, or a public space heavy with personal history. She is composed, exuding a confidence that borders on icy. Her gestures are controlled, her expressions measured. Every movement, every glance, is a reminder that she wields power in this interaction, and that the betrayal was intentional, calculated, and deeply wounding. The narrator, in contrast, is a mix of restraint and barely contained emotion. His chest tightens, hands clenching slightly at his sides, jaw set as he navigates the turbulence of grief, anger, and residual affection. He wants to reach out, to plead for answers, to reclaim the life they once shared, but the emotional and legal barriers make that impossible. The audience feels this tension in the pauses, the silences, the flickers of eye contact that speak volumes where words fail. Sensory details heighten the drama. The room smells faintly of her perfume, a subtle but sharp reminder of intimacy lost. The distant hum of city life outside contrasts with the charged quiet inside. He notices the way the sunlight catches the curve of her cheek, the nervous shift in her stance, the almost imperceptible tremor in her hands, small cues that hint at vulnerability beneath the composure. Each detail deepens the tension, making the confrontation visceral for viewers. Dialogue is careful, deliberate, and emotionally heavy. Words are laced with accusation, defense, and suppressed longing. They circle each other verbally, testing boundaries and unearthing old wounds. The narrator's voice may tremble at first, then steady as he asserts his truth. She responds with poise, but the cracks in her armor become apparent in fleeting expressions, a softened gaze, a slight hesitation, a fleeting glance that betrays a flicker of regret or unspoken history. This keynote is designed to be the emotional climax. The audience should feel the push and pull of power, vulnerability, and lingering attachment. The narrator is forced to confront the full spectrum of his feelings: hurt, betrayal, lingering care, and the tentative hope of moving forward. It is a moment where past and present collide, and where he must decide whether to remain tethered to what was lost or fully embrace what could be, a slow-burn tension that keeps viewers on edge. By the end, the confrontation resolves not in dramatics or melodrama, but in emotional clarity. Boundaries are established, truths are spoken, and the narrator steps back, feeling the weight of closure and the faint stirrings of possibility. He emerges not broken, but stronger, ready to carry the lessons forward and navigate the final chapter of his emotional journey. The storm has passed, but its echoes linger. After confrontation, reflection, and tentative steps toward new connections, the narrator finds himself in a space that feels lighter, calmer, yet charged with the quiet gravity of experience. He is no longer the man who walked out of his home in betrayal and confusion. He is someone who has faced loss, heartbreak, and the unraveling of a life he once thought secure, and survived. This part begins in a moment of introspection. He sits on a quiet balcony or in a serene park, the late afternoon sun casting warm golden hues over the city. The air is soft, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers, distant street food, and fresh rain on concrete. Each sensory detail grounds him in the present, reminding him that life continues, that beauty persists even after pain, and that he still has agency over his story. His thoughts drift naturally to the new woman he met, the one who has shown him patience, understanding, and subtle warmth. He remembers her quiet gestures, the gentle touch of her hand on his arm, the brief brush of hair from her face, the way she listened without judgment, laughed without pretense, and created a space where he could be vulnerable. These memories bring a soft smile to his lips, a flutter of possibility that contrasts with the heaviness of his past. Physical and emotional intimacy is subtle but significant. A shared bench in the park, hands brushing lightly, shoulders occasionally leaning toward each other, and lingering glances communicate connection and trust. There is no rush, no pressure, just a slow, deliberate unfolding of affection, the kind that YouTube audiences can feel deeply without crossing into anything explicit. Every gesture signals growth, safety, and the tentative beauty of new beginnings. The narrator also reflects on the life he has left behind. His wife's betrayal and the legal battles, while painful, have taught him resilience, self-worth, and the importance of boundaries. He allows himself gratitude for the lessons learned, clarity of heart, the courage to leave a toxic situation, and the capacity to rebuild trust in himself and others. There is acceptance here, not bitterness, but a grounded acknowledgement of reality and the wisdom it brings. Emotionally, this chapter is about closure and hope. He no longer feels tethered to the past. The pain of betrayal has softened into a quiet awareness, the grief into reflective melancholy, and the fear into cautious optimism. The audience experiences his internal transformation, the slow exhale after holding a breath for years, the subtle rise of lightness in his chest, the sense that life, though scarred, remains full of possibility. The story concludes with a moment of warmth and security. Perhaps he shares a soft smile with the new woman, their fingers brushing as they walk together, or he sits alone, journaling and feeling the peace of self-reliance and emotional maturity. The sensory world, the rustle of leaves, sunlight glinting on a river, distant laughter, mirrors his internal calm. By the end of this keynote, the audience feels resolution. Whether he moves forward into a loving connection or embraces personal growth and independence, the emotional arc is complete, heartbreak transformed into understanding, loss into resilience, and betrayal into the quiet lessons that shape a stronger, wiser self. It is a satisfying, human, and YouTube-friendly conclusion that lingers with viewers long after the story ends.